from the CyberHub bunker and studio. You're tuning in to the CyberHub podcast, Tech Corner. And now, join me in welcoming your host and CISO, James Azar.
Well, here we are with another Tech Corner. All of you degenerate, I'm kidding, all of you awesome people out there that are in security. Some people would say security people are degenerates, but we're not. I think we're the best.
We're a bit kooky, but that's okay.
Yeah, we're a bit crazy. And everything, like if you speak to a security person, everything seems like a conspiracy, right? I mean, everyone's gathering your data. Everyone's doing everything. But we just have a insight into technology. Joining me today is Jelle Wieringa. He's the security. Did I say your last name correct, Jelle?
It's good enough. It's close enough. It's Wieringa, but that's proper Dutch pronunciation. Who needs it?
Well, joining us from the other side of the pond in one of my favorite places on planet Earth, which is, the Netherlands, or Holland, as one may call it. Amsterdam and Hague's one of my, you cannot go to the Netherlands and not fall in love with the Netherlands.
Well, I live here. It's a beautiful country.
It is a beautiful country.
I have other countries just like you do with the Netherlands. So I think, but it's a beautiful country. It definitely is.
It's unbelievable. So, folks, Jelle and I are going to be taking you down a journey of cybersecurity and AI, and this is going to be a very, very fun one. So stay tuned. We're going to give you 30 minutes of hardcore conversation on just cyber and AI. Get you ready to rock and roll. So, Jelle, let's start off with this. A lot of people talk about AI. I've on record as I don't think we really have true AI yet. We've got narrow AI.
Ooh.
Right? But I don't think we have true AI in security. I'm not saying we don't have true AI in other aspects of technology, but in security, whenever I hear a sales rep call me up and go, we use AI, I'm like, well, tell me about your AI, thinking logic of how you guys programmed it. And then all of a sudden you're like, dude, this is machine learning. So help me understand where you think maybe we do have real AI.
Okay. If a sales rep calls you and tells you that they're leveraging AI in their product, it's definitely a sales pitch because most of the people don't know what they're talking about. That being said, it doesn't really matter because whether you're looking at AI from it being machine learning, from it being, it doesn't really matter. The thing is that as long as the company is evolving and using AI in their products, even in the most basic form. For instance, if it's just a decision tree, which is really basic, really simple. But as long as they're doing that, you can expect them to expand on it because AI definitely is the future for almost any cybersecurity vendor out there. It doesn't matter what you do. So the question is not whether or not you should laugh at the sales rep if he doesn't understand what AI is. The question you should ask them is, okay, so how are you leveraging AI in 1 year's time or in 2 years' time? If I buy into the product now, what will it look like in 2 years? Because if they're already doing AI and they're actually actively developing it further, it has potential.
So, but here, so let me push back. And folks, Jelle and I have known each other. We can agree to disagree and have a conversation and still love each other at the end of it. And shake on it, and when I'm in the Netherlands, we'll still grab fries.
We'll still grab a beer or something. Yep.
Yeah, and beer and fries because that's like my favorite thing to do is grab street fries in Amsterdam. They are amazing. But Jelle, so let me push back on that for just a second. All right, because here's the deal. I have yet to see one security product. And if I'm wrong, I'll gladly redact myself, okay? Because I don't think I know everything. But I have yet to see one security product that truly leverages actual AI. I've seen it use narrow AI. And narrow AI means they're using some aspects of AI, but it's not really true AI. And when someone says AI, my first question is not what you're going to be doing a year or two down the road, which is a very good question, by the way. My first qualifying question would be, well, how's AI thinking about this problem? Because that's what AI is. I'm programming a thought cycle that's going to naturally evolve through data.
Yeah, well, you basically look at AI as the science to make computers smarter,
or making processes smarter,
or make processes more automated, or leverage data and to do greater things. And I haven't run into the security product that uses true AI like that yet either. But what I've seen, there are vendors out there that are doing truly amazing things with AI and AI aspects. So while we might not have a AI, let alone a fully conscious one, let's not do Skynet here, right? But I don't think that's really, does that matter that there's not really one vendor out there that really truly does AI already? It doesn't matter. It's the value of artificial intelligence, and again, it doesn't matter if you call it machine learning, deep learning, or whatever, is to boost cybersecurity, is to augment what we as security experts cannot do. We live in a world where we have too much data, we have too many devices. Attacks are evolving daily. It's more attacks. There's more complex attacks. There's not enough cybersecurity professionals on this earth to handle it all. We need to look at AI. And I don't care whether it's baby steps, because I do feel that AI is still in its infancy. We have a long way to go till AI can dominate anything. But we have to latch onto AI to at least be able to defend ourselves against all of the bad guys that are out there. Because they certainly are using AI. They're leveraging it.
Well, they're leveraging narrow AI in order to monitor network traffic, monitor different processes that you've got in place, different milestones, goalposts, security checkposts. That's what they're leveraging it for. I look at AI as being the way for me to use human capital for what it's truly meant to be, right? And in security, I don't need human capital to analyze data. I need human capital to investigate data that is very, very relevant. And that's where I want AI, right? So I want AI to eliminate the tier 1 analyst in a SOC. I want AI to eliminate actual red teamers and blue teamers. Because I feel like, at least from a red team perspective, maybe not so much blue team, right? But from a red team perspective, I can teach AI to hack like the smartest hacker there is and evolve as it goes along to where it would be able to do that job utilizing those tools.
Sure, it's just a set of actions the AI would need to take in order to get somewhere. I don't think that's there yet. I don't think we are there yet. And there's also a lot of the ethics involved, right? You need to figure out what is it allowed to hack and what is it allowed to do and in what way is it allowed to do it. And that sort of thing is tricky as it is.
Well, you do that already today, though, with red teams, right? You do that today with red teams. I give you a scope and you go by that scope. So why would you not do the same with AI?
I don't think, I haven't heard of a AI that can really make the distinction in real time on anything good or bad. So I think it's still tricky to use it in such a way. And I think I look at AI more as an augmentation of what we do today. Like 30% in 2020, they estimate that around 30% of all tasks can be performed or are performed by an AI. And they're looking in the coming years, like in 2025, they want that to be a 50-50 ratio, 50% done by AI, 50% by humans. And I think that's way more where we need to take proper AI. True AI, where it is in effect of the same value as a human being would be in cybersecurity, I think that will take a long, long time before we get there. Think about it. It's very hard to figure out if you look at IOCs, right? You get data. the risk of running false positives, of getting false positives through AI is still very big. It can analyze the data. That's the easy part. It can even predict some of what's going to happen. That's pretty easy. That's pretty basic. But then figuring out if, for instance, from a non-security perspective, because a lot of what you do in business is based on risk. Not everything can be looked at from a technical perspective. So if you look at data from a non-technical perspective and involve risk, it's hard for an AI to make that guess. It's hard for an AI to look at an IOC and look at the business impact of that data. That's how I look at it. So it's
but you're talking about AI today, right? But then again,
about AI in the next couple of years, because I don't think it will be that quick.
Well, so we've seen the last 18 months, if they've taught us anything, is when a crisis arises, the human way of adapting and adopting quickly surely gets very creative.
True.
Right?
Definitely true. Yep.
I do see AI for a lot of companies, especially now. We're dealing with, I think, one of the most interesting crises that businesses have had in a very, very long time. They can't find people.
True. Definitely.
Right?
True.
So think of our experience with fast food. Right? I don't know when was the last time you went to a fast food restaurant or you traveled, but you go to an airport today to order food. You're not interacting with the cashier that's taking your order anymore. You're going to a touch screen. You're putting in your order. Someone's making it, and then someone's calling out your number and handing you your food. So they've eliminated that very mundane job that's called a cashier. So now a lot of companies and a lot of businesses are having a hard time hiring people. And they're going to go and say, well, here's AI technology. What could we have AI do that maybe I've got some employees that do job X, and job X is very repetitive. It involves taking A and moving it into B. It's a very repetitive job, right? It's kind of like the assembly line, like automation on an assembly line, right? Could I make a machine, or could I get a machine to do that action so that I can get my humans to do something else that's a little bit more significant for my business? And I think this is where we're going to see AI pick up a little bit quicker. I think a lot of big organizations that are looking at people that they've got, roles that they can't fill, are going to start going, what roles could we automate using AI? Or what part of what roles could we automate using AI?
Definitely. Like it's an estimate that by 2025, 80 million jobs are being replaced by AI. The good thing is 90 million jobs will be then created through that technology as well. But I think
but there's a big difference between the 18 million lost and the 90 million. I know that number.
There is a big difference. That's true, but it's not all bleak. That's what I'm trying to say. Right. Don't fear for your job necessarily. But if your goal is to free up your labor by replacing their mundane jobs through AI, I think we've come a long way already. That's already possible. Look at that server in that restaurant. Look, they don't even have to call out your name. They've got little robots that bring your food to your table. So that's perfectly well to automate that process, and you can use AI. And it actually doesn't have to be that smart, because the AI simply makes simple choices for simple actions with simple consequences. So, but if you look at cybersecurity, our job is hard. It's a tough job. It's a complex job. It's figuring out if your company is breach is under attack, had an incident, it can take weeks to figure out what happened. And it's not just simply the technology side. It's not just an AI that can look at all of the network traffic, analyze all the network traffic, and figure out everything, because there's more to an incident, more to cybersecurity than just data. There's the people element. Well, I work at KnowBe4. We know something about the people element. Look, if somebody actually clicked on a phishing link, sure, you can trace that. You can see in your logs, hey, hang on, somebody went to that website, downloaded some malicious content, et cetera, and that's where the ransomware started. But what you can't see is maybe the campaign that the cyber criminals already built to entice that person into clicking. Social engineering is just more than just sending a simple phishing email. That's something, if AI doesn't have data, if AI can't see, basically, it can't interpret. And if it can't interpret, it's kind of blind. So I think that a lot of the cybersecurity jobs that people do at larger organizations can't be replaced that easily by AI. And I don't think that should be the goal in itself. The goal of AI should be to make a better world, to help us to automate, yes, the mundane jobs and maybe even the more advanced jobs. But I think that we need to do it in a way that fits an organization and fits the task at hand. And that's not always as easy. So given that, I think the technology, in theory, is there for the large part. We just need to think about how do we apply it. That's where that's what we look at with AI at the moment.
So I agree with that to a specific extent.
Sure.
Okay, and I'll tell you where I kind of.
This is the fun part between us talking always.
well, so again, I don't want to argue a point if it doesn't make any sense, okay. But at the same time, the aspect of AI completely, kind of eliminating humans is overstated, kind of overhyped. I do think there's a specific part of the population that AI has forever taken their jobs away. And that to me is typically those entry-level roles, right? So we have to redefine what entry-level is going to mean going forward. Because an entry-level in a fast food restaurant used to be a cashier. Everyone knows how to count. Everyone knows how to speak to people. Everyone knows how to take money. And you don't even need to do any of those three. You can just sit there and the machine will tell you everything you need to do, right? That's now been replaced. So now that entry-level job for a high school kid as a cashier at a fast food place is pretty much gone, right?
Yeah, no, I get you. Yeah.
And we're starting to see kind of the evolution of that really develop from a technology perspective, because in the technology world, what we're starting to see is not only AI, but open source really are starting to play a role in getting rid of entry-level technology jobs.
Okay.
Which brings me to the ultimate conversation piece, right? Which is, as fun as AI would be in technology, AI in security still has more question marks than benefits. And those question marks exist in the following. You brought up one of them, which is ethics. And I think ethics is all about the person who does something, right? There are people who are very ethical, and there are people who are not very ethical. Mm-hmm. And when you're dealing with someone who's ethical, you know it. And when you're dealing with someone who's not ethical, you know that as well, right? Ethics is a part of that. I think the other part of it is the security of the AI thought process itself. So we've seen very complex supply chain attacks targeting code at its inception. We saw that with SolarWinds. We saw that with other type of incidents. We saw that with Microsoft over the last year. All the different Microsoft vulnerabilities as a result of SolarWinds.
Yeah.
So that to me is going to be the bigger question: is how do you learn to trust AI from a security perspective in a world where we say trust but verify?
Yeah, and in a world where data poisoning is definitely an attack vector that the bad guys can use to influence your AI and to influence the bias of your AI. It's a good question. It's a I actually don't know yet. Maybe we need an AI to look at an AI, right?
But that to me is the human capital aspect of it, right? So you've got a team of people that are working on an AI. They've mapped out the logic thought process of an AI. Mm-hmm. Right, and that's typically DevOps. That's not security, and I think people.
That's usually that's DevOps. Right? That's true. Yep. That's I did that in a team, and it was DevOps with data scientists, and those guys went at it, and came up with something that only then, after they finished it, went to a security expert to look at. It's not the other way around, unfortunately. But
yes. And thank you. I muted myself so that everyone listening wouldn't have to hear the sneeze. Because how uncomfortable would that be as you're jolly driving down the road? Then you hear a sneeze come out of your speakers. Not a very fun feeling. But that kind of what you're bringing out is, I think, the flaw that's currently going on in AI, where you're getting a team of DevOps and data scientists and all these different people sitting around coming up with this idea, writing millions and millions of lines of code, right? Using multiple GitHub or GitLab repositories or Bitbucket repositories to hone in on specific skills they want the AI to have, like the GPT-3 kind of concept of AI, kind of that open source AI process that's out there today. And then they take it to security, and now security's got to look through millions of lines of code to identify something. And I think this is where security needs to be at the same table in these discussions. Deployed lines of code should get approved, and then once they're deemed secure, should be locked in that vault where that code is unchanged, right? Think of it as almost like encryption. Like, I'm a big fan of the way we use encryption in key management to use it with code. So you're right, 10,000 lines of code, we reviewed it. Those lines of codes are effective, they're locked in. This is that part process. You kind of put it in a locker where only 2 people have the key to it, right? And it's a private key. You can't get into it. It's locked in that vault. More and more code comes in. You're not really seeing those lines. You're really seeing yours. And then maybe you've got a QA engineer and a security engineer that are really monitoring any conflicts that come through the SLDC and CI/CD pipeline. And that's really how you start to build out a security by design AI model where you don't let someone corrupt it. Now you make it harder. You're not going to make it impossible. If someone wants to sneak in 2,000, SolarWinds was 2,000 lines of code. People don't know how hard, how easy it is to write 2,000 lines of code. But talk to any DevOps guy, and they'll be like, "Well, if you know what you're doing, you can write it in a day."
You get assisted, but there's plenty of ways to do it. But now, okay, so that's a technical part. But then, if you're a security engineer, you're an analyst, you sit in the SOC all day, right? In the Security Operations Center, look at screens all day, talk to customers, evaluate IOCs, etc., etc. The biggest lesson we learned, because we tried to build an AI engine. We tried to build it to enhance the features and the functionality of our SOC. And it was actually pretty successful. We were acquired, etc., etc. So that was okay. But the biggest thing we've learned is it's not only about having your security people look at code and look at the things that DevOps build. Basically, you need them to actually determine what you want to build in the first place. Because the biggest problem that we see that we saw is that the technology of building an AI isn't really a problem. Data, we had heaps of data, petabytes of data, more data than we could use. The biggest problem is, what do we do with that data, and how do we want an AI to interpret that data to bring us valuable results? Things we and our customers actually want to see. Things that prove valuable not only from a security perspective, but also from a risk perspective, threat perspective, and a business perspective altogether. And that's where AI, I think, today is struggling somewhat. Because if you look at those security companies, Darktrace is a really good example. They leverage AI in a big way. And might not be true AI, might not be the most sophisticated AI you can think of, but they're out there. They're at the forefront of leveraging AI in security. But I feel that every time I look at that product, I think that's an awesome product. But in itself, the product alone can't run security. You still need people, you still need everybody else. And that's where we stand today. And I would love to go to a place where we can actually decide that we, for instance, buy a product that's more role specific. That AI that helps that level 1 SOC engineer or that level 2 SOC engineer. But it's not the way it's being developed. It's being developed in a very generic approach. Looking at...
It's being developed in a way where they're using old ways of doing it rather than kind of focusing on the modern way of doing things. In some cases, not in all cases.
Okay, so what's the old versus the modern way?
Old is write it, deploy it, fix it as you go along.
Okay.
Okay. The modern way of doing it is measure 10 times, cut once, but then, it's the difference between BMW and Mercedes.
Okay. I drive a BMW. Which one comes out?
I drive a Mercedes. So let me give you the example.
That's like the difference between us.
Let's talk about the difference. BMW is always at the forefront of innovation, right? When something comes out, they're the first to put it in their cars, but then it's also the first thing to break in the car. And you're constantly taking your car in the shop to fix a feature because they've put it on, they've bolted it on without really doing all the proper Q&A testing, without really ensuring that it can sustain different ways that it can operate. Where you've got Mercedes, on the other hand, Mercedes isn't always the first to put something in their car, but when they put it in the car, it'll operate for as long as you've got that car for the most part. I'm not saying Mercedes is better than BMW or BMW is better than Mercedes. That's semantics.
It's the N-1 principle that Mercedes does.
Right.
Basically.
It's
look at the newest tech and then use one lower version lower than that and make sure that everything is proven technology first.
Well, because for Mercedes, they don't want to have, Mercedes prides itself on the fact that the only service you've got to give its car is the traditional services that you've got to give a car: oil changes, air filter, oil filter, all that good stuff. BMW, on the other hand, their body designs, the way they use features, the models they put out. I mean, I had an M5 at some point in my life. That car spent more time in the shop than it did in my possession. In my ownership cycle.
Remove it.
Right? Because there were constantly things were breaking in that model.
Well, first thing they do is they hook up a computer to my car. That's the first thing they do. And then the computer will tell me and the engineer what's wrong with the car, if it needs servicing or anything. So, yeah, it is. That's the way BMW does that. I still love the car, by the way, but that's something entirely different. But now take that to that approach. That would be cool. But I don't think that approach would work for AI, would it? If you want to develop an AI, are you looking for bleeding edge stuff or are you looking for proven stuff? I think that you want that proven technology in the core. You want to make sure that the engine of your AI works properly. But then you want to look at how you can push the limits, push the boundaries of that AI to get it to do the next big thing. Because that's what it's all about. And that's where all the trouble comes from in security. Because if you always start looking for the new thing, always try unproven things, you are bound to make mistakes. And mistakes in security are costly. They're very costly. So I think that's one of the reasons why AI in security isn't going as fast as, say AI in healthcare, which is making great strides forward.
AI in healthcare, I think, like I said, I think that's very, very different. Very, very different, right?
It is. That's true. Yep, it is definitely different. But it's
like I said. I mean, I think AI in technology in general, right? We know that AI is being used in social media algorithms, right?
Yep.
There's been a plethora of documentaries and stories around the idea of how AI is being used in social media. That's not the issue. The issue is, how do you responsibly use AI in security? How does that work within a product development, right? How does that work from a defense perspective? It's funny. I did a survey a while back, Jelle, and I asked CISOs, I said, how many of you guys actually do a vendor risk management assessment on your cybersecurity vendors?
Oh, that's a good question. And?
30% do those.
Oh, that's not too... Okay. We still have a while to do that in.
Now, let me give you a little feedback. A few years ago, pre-COVID, I had a delegation from the awesome Czech Republic here, and they were all AI cybersecurity companies, you name it, technology companies that were doing business development in Georgia, and I got to host them for a day talking about cyber. where we did a bunch of roundtables, a bunch of events. It was a lot of fun. So at the end of the day, I did a workshop just for those Czech companies. And I asked every single one in the room, I said, how many of you went through training around cybersecurity when you onboarded to the company you work for now? And only 10% did that. So imagine the lapse that exists between practitioners of security, because we assume that it's a security company, that they know how to do security. But mind you, Kaseya was an MSP that had an SP version to it, an MSSP, so a security version to it. And they got held by ransomware that escalated down to 1,500 of their customers, and in turn to 25,000 of their customers.
Yeah, but it is the not everybody that works at a security company is a security expert.
Very interesting. Why is that? Right, because you're hiring other business roles. So now but then these are the same people that go on LinkedIn and are like, if this company had our tool, they would. And dude, I can fish your accounting guy. He probably wouldn't know light from day and fall for the same shtick that this company had happened to it as well. So
it comes back to that sales guy we were talking about in the beginning. If you get a sales rep that tells you we've got a security product and we leverage AI, buy us because we will save the world with our product. Well, you shouldn't necessarily believe them. You can question them and challenge them on how to leverage AI and et cetera. And if they're smart, they bring in someone else that actually knows what they're talking about. Although there are very good sales reps in security that actually do know what they're talking about.
I completely agree.
Definitely some really good ones. But if you look, so the bottom line is, if you're looking to bolster your security, AI, especially in the future, is definitely the way to go. I truly believe that AI can do wonders for us. It can make sure that we save time. So we get, as security experts, get more time to do other things as well, other things we definitely need to do. It makes sure that we can interpret data more quickly and accurately. We can do more preventative stuff. We can do more predictive things, because look at if we can leverage prediction in different and new ways, that would save many companies. That would help out a lot. But we can also use AI to look at, for instance, cognitive behavior. IBM does that. So it looks at cognitive behavior of users, not so much as to only strengthen security. It's a feature, but it's also a feature to make the user flow easier. Because if you are in a lower risk profile according to the AI, you get less challenges. They won't ask you for your password or MFA so many times. But if you're in a higher tier of risk, they'll strengthen their security and ask you for, hey, hang on, I know you just done your password, but please enter it again after an hour, or use AI or 2 layers of security, whatever. That's how you can definitely use AI. And if you are of a futuristic mindset and AI interests you, look into it. There are definitely companies out there that use parts of a true AI, let's keep it at that are interesting to watch.
Completely agree with everything you just said, right? There are companies out there that are truly using true AI, and it's fascinating. It's great to watch it happen. In security, I'm not pessimistic. I'm very optimistic about the adoption of AI. I'm very pessimistic about the way AI is going to be presented, which is going to create a level of disinformation and misdirection that is going to confuse the people who buy it, who may not fully understand what it means, and really kind of over-promising and under-delivering on the performance of an AI within a specific environment. To me, that's the concern, right? My concern is that you're going to have someone who's going to sell something to someone who doesn't know what they're really buying, who doesn't really properly deploy it, but brags about it. And then that sets AI and security back, because now it makes people rethink the actual deployment of AI in specific environments. I see the benefit of AI. I'm a fan of AI.
Sure.
I'm just concerned about how people deploy AI and their expectations of it over the long term.
That's with every technology, every new technology. That's a given. So basically, make sure you understand at least the basics so you know what you're talking about when you are looking at AI, or you do have products that offer you benefits through AI. Be always questioning things is good, right? Be wary, trust but verify, something we say in security. Do that with this as well. I do think that if you look at all the security products out there now that leverage AI, nobody buys them purely for the AI part. At least I wouldn't. I would buy them for their core technology, core functionality. And then if they have AI, if they offer some form of AI to enhance what they're already doing, that's a great thing.
Agreed.
But I wouldn't spend a dime on an algorithm that I wouldn't trust or don't really know what it does in itself. It's the total package that you look for. So with AI, in that sense, it is, even though it's in its infancy, it's a big step forward than what we had 10 years ago. When I've been in the business for 20 years. 20 years ago, AI the word wasn't even invented. It's before the Terminator movies, right? So we didn't have AI. No, but now we have these really cool things, and there's big companies that are pushing to develop AI. There are big companies that actually have good security expertise on board that we in the whole industry can leverage. I would love for the AI initiatives to be more open, so we would share more. That way we could speed things along really nicely. And now it's a big, there's still a lot of competitors that build AI, but will never, ever trust each other. So a lot of the things that they discover stay indoors and behind closed doors. It's just simply the way it is. But think about it, 10 years' time, how would the world look like? If you're a SOC analyst, how much of your job can be done by the AI, and how much time do you have? How would that change your job? That's fascinating.
Agreed. Jelle, thank you so much for coming on this week's Tech Corner. I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun, man. I could go on for like another hour having this discussion, but we are 7 minutes over this week's episode. Yeah, it's okay. People are very interested. I'm sure they'll tune in. Maybe we'll do a part 2 next month. That'll be a lot of fun. So folks, that's it for this week's Tech Corner. Please make sure to subscribe. Smash that alert button and subscribe button while you're at it. Share today's episode. If you have questions about AI, you can comment below. We'll get to those as well. If you want to point us in a direction where maybe we've said something, because neither of us claims to be the smartest guy in the room, but if we said something and you want to correct it, please cite your sources when you're correcting. I often get people to say, you're talking out of your tail, you don't know what the heck you're talking about. And then I'm like, cite me the source of why you're true, and I'll gladly redact what I say or adopt my opinion, because technology evolves so fast that what I can think on Monday could change on Friday if technology proves me otherwise. With that being said, Jelle, how can people follow you, buddy?
LinkedIn is the easy way to. I'm from Europe. We use LinkedIn a lot. Twitter as well. But definitely LinkedIn. Look me up, and then we'll connect.
Brilliant. I'll put his LinkedIn profile in the links in the show notes so you guys can go and check it out as well. Folks, thanks so much for tuning in. Jelle, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your weekend, buddy. Everyone else, thank you so much for tuning in. Stay cyber safe. See you Monday on the Practitioner Brief, 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Don't want to miss it. Stay tuned.
Make sure to subscribe to our podcast and share it with your friends and colleagues. And get all the latest information at cyberhubpodcast.com.